So when you think about aviation's environmental impact, your mind probably goes up, right? To the contrails and the exhaust high up in the sky. But what if a huge part of the problem and the solution is right here on the ground? We're about to dig into a really radical new idea that aims to do something incredible, not just pollute less, but actually clean our world.
An airplane that cleans the air? I know, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But that's the big idea behind this new framework called Aero PMM. And this isn't about some new kind of fuel or a slightly more efficient engine. No, this is a complete top-to-bottom rethink of how aviation interacts with the environment, from the airport gate all the way up to 30,000 feet.
Okay, so here's our flight plan for this explainer. First, we're going to uncover aviation's hidden environmental footprint, the stuff that goes way beyond the tailpipe. Then, we'll dive into the core vision of Aero PMM and its two-front strategy, one for the ground and one for the sky. Finally, we'll see how this whole thing scales up to the entire airport, and, this is the most important part, how we can actually prove it's doing any good. All right, let's get into the problem itself. Because it turns out, the thing we all see, that exhaust from a jet way up at cruise altitude, well, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. The full story is actually happening much, much closer to home. I mean, just look at this list of pollutants. We're talking about so much more than one thing. You've got this ultrafine soot coming from the APUs, those little jet engines in the tail that power the plane while it's parked. Then there are tiny particles from the brakes and tires every single time a plane lands. Up in the sky, you have contrails, which can act like a big blanket trapping heat in our atmosphere. And yeah, there are even microplastics to think about inside the cabin. It's a way more complicated picture than you might think.
So, with a problem this messy, a little tweak here and there just isn't going to cut it. You need a whole new vision, and that is exactly what Aero PMM brings to the table. A huge shift from just trying to do less harm to actually creating a measurable environmental benefit.
So what is Aero PMM really? Well, it's not a single gadget. It's more like a blueprint, a whole new architecture for aviation. The two keywords here are measurable and positive. The entire goal is to prove with cold, hard data that flying can actually do good. Now, it's super important to remember, this is still a concept being developed. You're not going to see it at your airport gate tomorrow. This quote really just nails it. For decades, the entire industry has been focused on being less bad, right? More fuel efficient, quieter engines. Aero PMM comes along and asks a totally different question. Can we actually make flying a net positive? Can an airport leave the air cleaner than it was before? I mean, that is a huge, huge ambition. So, how do they even plan to do this? Well, it's a two-front strategy. On the ground, the name of the game is capture and protect, literally grabbing and filtering pollutants where it's safest and easiest to do so. But up in the sky, the whole strategy flips to avoid and sense, using data and smart flying to stop pollution from ever being created in the first place.
Let's dive into that first part, the cleanup on the ground. This is where we get to see the actual hardware, the stuff designed to capture pollution right at the source. Okay, so the concept lays out three main pieces of gear. First, get this, a purifier built right into the landing gear hub to suck up brake and tire dust. And the really brilliant part? It's powered by the wheel's own rotation and vibration, no extra energy needed. Second, there's an exhaust polisher that attaches to the APU to capture all that soot while the plane's at the gate. It's a simple remove before taxi part, kind of like a wheel chalk. And third, there's a mobile HUD that the ground crew can just roll up to capture emissions during engine start, a process that takes less than 2 minutes. And it's not just about pollution. The concept even includes bird-safe gear covers. By using special matte paint and patterns that look like a zebra's stripes, they make the gear less attractive to birds and other wildlife, which helps cut down on dangerous bird strikes. It might seem like a small detail, but it just shows how this system is thinking about the entire airport environment. Okay, so that's the ground game. But the second the plane takes off, the strategy does a complete 180. It becomes less about physical hardware and all about using smart data. And the number one absolute rule for the in-flight strategy is safety first. The Aero PMM concept is crystal clear on this. You do not mess with the main engine exhaust while the plane is in the air. It's just way too risky. So the focus is on finding other, much safer ways to make a difference. So here's the 4-step Smarter Skies plan. First, the system predicts where those warming contrails are most likely to form. Second, it nudges the flight plan. We're talking really small altitude adjustments here to just fly around those areas. Third, for flights that absolutely can't avoid those zones, it prioritizes using cleaner, sustainable aviation fuel because that fuel produces less of the soot particles that contrails need to form. And finally, the plane itself becomes a flying weather station, constantly sensing the atmosphere and feeding that data back to make the whole system even smarter over time.
So, we've covered the plane on the ground and in the air. But now, let's zoom out. Because this idea isn't just about upgrading a single aircraft. It's about turning the entire airport into one big cleaning machine. This is the Smart Apron idea. Just imagine every single baggage cart, every catering truck, all those ground vehicles, and each one has its own mini purifier. So as they're just doing their normal jobs, driving around the tarmac, they're also constantly scrubbing the air clean. It's basically a fleet of Roombas for the airport's air quality. How cool is that?
Of course, a great idea is nothing if you can't get people to actually use it. So how do you get airlines and airports on board? Well, the framework proposes giving planes with this tech priority green slots for takeoff. It also suggests new kinds of financing where investors get rewarded for hitting real pollution reduction targets. And for the ground crews, it even suggests gamified dashboards that make their jobs more efficient and more rewarding. It's all about making sure everyone's interests are pulling in the same direction.
You know, making a huge claim like we're going to have a positive environmental impact is one thing, but proving it, that's a whole different ballgame. And that brings us to the last and maybe most critical piece of this whole puzzle: data.
The whole system is designed so that every single action gets tracked and fed into one central dashboard. It's a full-on monitoring, reporting, and verification system, an MRV. You can think of it like a Fitbit for the entire airport. It's constantly tracking everything, from the grams of soot captured at the gate to the kilometers of warming contrails avoided up in the sky. This is how you prove it's actually working.
Okay, this all sounds fantastic, but I know what you're thinking. What does it cost? Well, the initial estimate from the source document puts the basic kit to outfit one aircraft at around $20,000.
But here's where it gets really interesting. You've got that $20,000 cost, right? But the potential annual value is estimated at $100,000 per plane. Now, how is that even possible? It comes from things like avoiding pollution fines, earning environmental credits, and even being able to sell the valuable atmospheric data the plane is collecting. The system is designed not just to be green, but to be profitable.
And this whole vision doesn't even stop at our own planet. The people behind this are already thinking about Astro PM, taking these same ideas and applying them to the challenges of spaceflight and even future bases on the moon. So the sky is literally not the limit here.
So that's Aero PMM. It's a massive vision. And yeah, it's still theoretical. But it forces us to ask a really powerful question. What if airports weren't just a source of pollution that we had to manage? What if they could actually become a force for environmental regeneration? It's a wild idea, and a really fascinating one to think about.